This is May 7th, 2017. I wondered how many years I would get into 2017. I even wondered at one time, would I make it to 2000? So here we are, 2017. Now, I plan to speak to you for a while from the book of Hebrews. This is one of the most important books of the New Testament, and I will be taking our communion exhortations from this book, and the title will be, "We have the new and the better because of Jesus." Yes. So let's start out with Hebrews, the first chapter. We'll read the first 3 verses and get our start. Hebrews 1 through 3. Now just think of the individual thoughts that are mentioned here as we begin reading. God, who at sundry times or many times and in diverse manners or different manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets. But listen, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son. There's your contrast. Whom he hath appointed heir of all things, and look, by whom also he made the worlds. Still speaking of him, Jesus, who being the brightness of his glory. Now that's when Jesus came to earth and lived among man. Being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person, and also upholding all things by the word or the command of his power, when he had by himself purged our sins. And look, now he is sat down on the right hand of the Majesty on high. Look at all those statements. My goodness. Now the book of Hebrews was written primarily to the Jews in Palestine in Paul's day. There was a severe persecution going on at that time. They were only a few years away from the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And so there was a danger of many of those Jews leaving the new Christian way and going back to the Old Testament way. So the Apostle Paul wrote Hebrews in about 63 AD, and this was to encourage these persecuted Jews to be faithful to the new and better way. Hebrews was also written to comfort and to instruct us as we people read it in these days later. But the overall theme of the book of Hebrews was to explain the superiority of the New Testament way, the New Testament teaching, over the Old Testament way and the Old Testament teaching. And all of this was because of Jesus. Jesus was the one who made it better as well as new. So Christianity is certainly better than the old Mosaic way, called in our minds the Old Testament. Now all of this begins to be seen in the first few verses right off in the very first chapter. Now we're used to the New Testament way. We've been taught that all of our lives. we think, what else is there? What else should there be? But this wasn't true of the Jews of that time. They had just come from the Old Testament way, known as the way of Moses, and they had come over into the New Testament way, which was brand new. But listen, the New Testament is superior by far. And this they needed to know so they wouldn't go back. And this is what we need to know that we're a part of today. We've got the best. You know that? This is the best that's ever been presented to humankind. It's the last that's going to be presented to humankind because it is the best. There can't get any better. So remember that, would you please? And so the very first thing that's stated here in Hebrews to prove all of this is this, that God first spoke to the people of old times by the prophets. But now He speaks to us through His Son Jesus. Well, that's simple enough, but it's very dynamic. Yes, indeed. So you see, here is our first mentioned contrast between the Old Testament and the New Testament, that God spoke to those people back there through human spokesmen, human beings. But now He has done it through Jesus, who is the Son of God. And then Paul, in these 3 verses, vividly points out the better differences. And the very first one is that Jesus is heir of all things. What are you heir of? What were they heir of? What were those prophets heir of? Nothing. Next to nothing. But Jesus, because He's the Son of God, was heir of all things. And not only that, God included Jesus to make all things in the creation. None of the prophets were involved in the creation. Jesus was. Jesus displayed a brilliance from God and about God when He came to the earth. When He walked among man, He showed the exact image and the exact resemblance of God as He appeared among people when Jesus was on earth. Now this was, shall we say, just like a stamped image on a coin. Jesus showed the perfect image of God's character when He was on earth. And so often people have their wonderments about God. What does He look like? What is He like? What is there about Him? So the answer is, if you can see Jesus, you can know God. And I want to read that to you in John chapter 14, starting with verse 8. Philip saith unto Him, Lord, show us the Father, and it will suffice us. Jesus saith unto him, Have I been so long with you, and yet hast thou not known me, Philip? He that has seen me hath seen the Father. And how sayest thou then, Show us the Father? Believest thou not that I am in the Father, and the Father in me? The words that I speak unto you, I speak not of myself, but the Father that dwelleth in me, He doeth the works. In other words, folks, when you learn about Jesus, and when those people, especially the apostles, saw Jesus, they learned about God and they saw God. There's your answer. So Jesus was all of this, perfect image and resemblance of God when He was on earth. Not only that, but Jesus upholds all things by His word or His command. He spoke to create, and He still speaks to sustain. That's right. He sustains the universe as well as backs with all of His authority the truth and the righteousness that He brought and when He taught here on earth. So He personally, purging our sins, verified that He was truly the Son of God. He was all that is declared here in the book of Hebrews. And guess what? He now sits on the right hand of the majesty of God on high. Could you have any better credentials? Did the prophets have these credentials? No, indeed. But Jesus did. All of this establishes Jesus as worthy of our attention at communion time. So when we come each Lord's Day to think about Jesus, think about these first 3 verses in the first chapter of Hebrews that so completely describes Jesus. He is worthy of our devotion. He is worthy of our loyalty. He is worthy of our thankfulness. So when you come to communion time, enjoy these minutes with Jesus as you remember Him, because God is speaking through Jesus today and not the prophets. What we have today is better, it is new, it is the best, and I think I would like to remember that when I come to communion time. Folks, we've got the best.
Amen.
And it will take us all the way to glory. Just like Paul was encouraging those people to be faithful, don't go back from what will take you to glory. We are headed in the right direction. We are headed in the best direction. We are headed in the only right direction. Remember that when you take the cup, when you take the loaf. This is what Jesus brought to us,
Amen.
not the prophets. What do you think? I love it.